Greetings. It is Monday, the 15th of June, in the rather interesting and eventful year of 2026. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. A deal that was, wasn't, or isn't. Well, I'm sorry to pop everybody's bubble, but there was never a ceasefire. As of this morning, there really isn't a deal. They're talking about signing something at the end of the week. That's a long way away when it comes to these sorts of things. There's no consolidated Iranian government. There's a lot of infighting there. It's been reported that there are people in what passes for a military junta saying we're not going to surrender to the Americans, we're going to keep our uranium. And there's others that want to see reason, or at least their version of reason. And also the Israelis, they're not cooperating or signing off on anything. They're still dropping bombs like they usually do. And there's no sign that the United States has thrown off the Israeli lobby or AIPAC or anything like that. And Congress is still firmly in the back pocket of that little Middle Eastern country. No, but the stock market is rising today all over the world. Stocks are going up and oil prices are going down. Wow. I wonder. Somebody's making a lot of money or has made a lot of money, and I don't think it's us. Well, we'll see what goes on. It's a confusing situation. It's easy to say that in war, but this one is either going to turn out to be the greatest psychological warfare coup in history or a total cock-up. I don't think there's going to be much middle ground there. Nobody in the Middle East wants to see the Iranian government in its current form survive in any form, because if that happens, they have won. They have won by right of survival. They've beat the great Satan, and they will be unstoppable. So why would Trump want to do a deal with that? Don't know. There's perfectly good opportunities for other, more sane regimes to go in there and take over that country. The Israelis sure don't want to see an Islamic Republic back again. And just about everybody in the Middle East who's been at the receiving end of their jihad missiles, well, they're probably tired of it as well and just want to go back to making money and using their solid gold toilets. No. There's going to be a lot happening here. Something's going to give. I doubt very much the Israelis are going to give up power over the United States or power over anything for that matter. So don't really believe this stuff. Everybody is lauding it as some sort of great birthday present for Donald Trump. What do you think? Speaking of Donald Trump's birthday, yes, the man is 80 years old. 80 years old. Wow. Most 80-year-olds can't get jobs in this country. Hell, most people in their 60s can't get jobs in this country, but we have someone leading us who is 8 decades old. This is interesting because there was a celebration on the White House South Lawn, which, frankly, I found repulsive. It looked like basically an erector set from hell. It's a strange thing they put up there, and for the president's enjoyment. It would have been more Roman if they had swords and shields, but I guess, we can't really do that these days, can we? To be fair, it's not the first time there have been boxing matches at the White House. Teddy Roosevelt, president in the first few years of the 20th century, used to regularly spar with people in the White House gym. I don't know if he ever invited any members of Congress to come and get pulverized in the ring with him. He was pretty good, too, supposedly. Actually, that was such an abomination to see that, frankly. I'm not against Trump 100%. I'm not for him 100%, but that was pretty icky. But at the same time, is it really as bad or as big as other birthdays? Now, Donald Trump is regularly compared to Adolf Hitler. Of course, why the comparison? It's not just a bit silly, it's out now stupid and a clear indication of Trump derangement syndrome, which is a real condition. But when it comes to birthday celebrations, well, who did it better? Back in 1939, good old Adolf Hitler, yes, everybody's favorite Nazi, he turned 50 years old, and boy, did that country celebrate. They had a big turnout. Supposedly, it cost $320 million back then. I don't know what that would be now, but it would probably be, price of a good aircraft carrier. Anyways, what did they do back then? Well, there were parades, which Trump likes. There was overhead flights. Now, that's something that Trump had yesterday, and that must have cost a bit of money. There should be an accounting of all this. I doubt very much private corporations paid to have fighter jets fly over Washington, D.C., but the U.S. military puts off everything that they don't want to account to training. No, the National Socialists, they had horses, they had bugles, they had gifts, they had church bells, they had all sorts of interesting things and a bunch of decorations around. Of course, there was new architecture. So there's a lot of parallels between what's Trump doing in Washington and what Hitler did in Berlin. But, at the end of the day, I did find a documentary on Hitler's 50th birthday. I thought it was more tasteful. There were no signs of any fight cages anywhere. No, they didn't have that. They had children with flowers. I didn't see Trump with any children with flowers. I saw a bunch of Marines standing guard outside of a Thunderdome. Wasn't that the movie that was with Mel Gibson and about the end of the world? Yeah. At the end of the day, I don't think Trump spent all that much money as Hitler did, but Hitler, maybe there was better taste at the time. It would be interesting to have a comparison between the two birthday celebrations. Trump at 80, Hitler at 50. Who did it better? Now, speaking of strange things, New York City, yes, that place that's always had trouble. They had basketball riots, kind of the way some third world countries have soccer riots. Now, for the record, I absolutely despise basketball. I don't like any professional sports. I used to like baseball as a kid, but that kind of got screwed up for me when they started introducing steroids into the mix. No, I don't like professional sports. I think it's a waste of time. But still, a lot of Americans do like it. But unfortunately, some people let it go overboard. Well, there are two big basketball teams, and they had the finals. It was the New York Knicks versus the San Antonio Spurs. And the New York Knicks won for the first time in more than half a century. And instead of going into the streets and celebrating with champagne and hugging each other and everything, they set fire to school buses, got into fist fights, threw Molotov cocktails. Yeah, it wasn't as bad as is being depicted in the mainstream media, not by historic New York standards, but it's a little bit overboard. But to be fair, it's not uncommon. New York has all sorts of crazy things that's happened throughout its history. In 1863, where there was the infamous New York draft riots, that occurred when some bonehead at the post office listed the names of all the people who have been called up for military service next to all of those who had been killed at the recent Battle of Gettysburg, and the city exploded. And heaven help you if you were a black man, because you would probably be lynched. And a lot of them were. The U.S. Navy ended up shelling the city. Yes, the U.S. naval warships started firing cannonballs onto New York City. New York's had a lot of crazy riots. There was one in the 70s when there was a blackout, and when everyone realized that there was no power, no alarms, and the police weren't responding, they started stealing, looting, and all sorts of stuff. New York's always been a mess. The only time it's any good is when you have a ruthless man and a ruthless police force that are willing to be brutal to the average person in the street that looks suspicious. Mr. Giuliani. Great time. New York was wonderful when he was there. Now you have a literal communist who's trying to, well, honestly, it's going to go bad, folks. I think this is a sign of what you're going to be seeing more and more of. And what was once the Big Apple, it's going to go down. Frankly, I think that federal troops should go in and basically arrest everybody who's running that excuse for a metropolitan government, but that's just me. Do know this, that sort of crap goes on in New York a lot throughout its history. Gang warfare used to be, well, it would scare people in Middle Eastern countries, the stuff that's going on in New York, especially back in the 1970s. But people are attributing this to America going down the hill. Well, it's actually New York City that's been going down for a very long time. Hell, even George Washington got chased out of the city because of violence. We're losing Tulsi Gabbard, the director of Central Intelligence. Now, she is one of those gorgeous women that get into politics every so often, and there's several good-looking women in the Trump administration, and it kind of gets into a comparison, or do you like Marianne or Ginger? And a lot of people are Tulsi guys. I'm a Tulsi guy myself. She's smart, tough, and she, fortunately, is leaving office right now. But she left with some very interesting things to talk about. Namely, she released information on the 120 biolabs around the world that were funded by the U.S. government, i.e. the American taxpayer, and there were 40 of them in Ukraine alone. Yes, that Ukraine, the one that's being bombed into oblivion, the ones the Russians invaded. And if you remember, back in the day, the Russians were saying they went there because they were scared of the biolabs that the Americans had put up there, and everyone was calling it propaganda and a conspiracy theory. Well, guess what? It was true. Tulsi has done us a wonderful service of showing, well, how the U.S. government has so many skeletons in the closet. It has several closets by this point. The blame is, of course, being put on the Biden administration, but to be fair, it goes back a long way. The United States government pretty much went rogue after World War II. It really did. It really, really did. It had problems when the Federal Reserve came out. The Roosevelt administration, the second one, not the guy who was boxing back in the day, that had its skullduggery. World War II came about, which could have been prevented if it was done properly. But after World War II, the U.S. seemed to have thrown morality out the window. It was like Battle for the Planet of the Apes, except we were the apes. We kind of went overboard, experimented on our own people with biological agents, got into wars that we shouldn't have gotten into, assassinated foreign leaders, all sorts of things we never would have done 100 years earlier. Hell, 200 years earlier, for sure. No, Tulsi is basically leaving her office, probably with the hopes of coming back to a higher one at some point. She's leaving office and telling us exactly what we have to do, and that is to clean up the mess that we've made. The war you're seeing in the Middle East is just the latest incarnation of that. The whole reason the Islamic Republic of Iran came into existence was because of Jimmy Carter, cursed be his name, and the skullduggery he was involved with, because he was a nice guy and wanted to bring peace to that part of the world. Every time we try to bring peace to some place, you ever notice how it turns into a real bloodthirsty brawl and a body count to match? No, we need more people like Tulsi in government. We need more people like Tulsi everywhere. We need more decent people in this country that know enough to mind their own business and remember the principles upon which the United States was founded. Now, in leaving today, I want to answer a question that has been raised a few times, and a few people have been very pointed with it, and that is, at the end of every broadcast, I talk about something that must be destroyed. Usually it's Clown World, the Deep State, and something else. Well, where did that come from? A lot of people aren't as educated as they used to be, and they probably never heard of Cato the Elder. Yes, Cato the Elder, formerly known as Marcus Porcius Cato. He lived in ancient Rome from 239 to 149 before the Common Era, BC. He was a Roman senator, and he didn't like a place called Carthage. Now, that is a very long history lesson of Rome versus Carthage. Eventually, Rome destroyed Carthage, but he really, really wanted it destroyed. So at the end of every speech he gave in the Roman Senate, he ended it saying, Carthago delenta est, which means Carthage must be destroyed. And eventually, it was destroyed. And there's a lot of things that we have out there that are messing up our world that need to be destroyed. Not negotiated with, not treaties to be signed with, not accommodation, not coexistence, utter, complete, and total obliteration. It worked for the Romans, it worked for good old Cato, maybe it'll work for us. Clown world, which is another name for all the insanity out there. How many genders are there? Well, there are 3, male, female, and mentally ill. That's just part of it all. The deep state, well, that speaks for itself, and there's a lot of people talking about that. But the third thing that I'm going to start putting in as a regular from today is artificial intelligence. And look for some reports on that in the future. But I have now become totally convinced that artificial intelligence is the greatest threat to humanity since anything. It's a threat to us the way a big asteroid was a threat to the dinosaurs some 35 million years ago, as I recall. But we'll go into that later. Anyways, I want to thank several people who made some new equipment possible. There's still more that is needed. And I will be back with more episodes during the week. Now that I have the means to do so, it'll be a lot more material that you'll be hearing coming out. Thank you all for listening and hanging in there with me for all these years. And that's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, and don't wish them well. They are enemies, and you really don't want to wish them well. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. I'm also up on other social media platforms, but not Facebook. Never Facebook. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, clown world, the deep state, and artificial intelligence must be destroyed. Delenta est. Good day.